We finally have finished up our landing page, complete with responsive design for large screens all the way down to small mobile devices. Let's go ahead and wrap up this section with our look at Material UI and all of our tools for building out our front end by building our contact page. This is going to be a much simpler page than the landing page was. It's not going to take as many components. There's not going to be as much interactivity or functionality that we'll have to worry about, so it's not going to take us nearly as much work. That being said, we're still going to learn some new components and refine our skills with the grid system as we build a new design. Just like before, let's go ahead and start off by breaking down the design into the grid structure that we'll need to implement it. Just like always, let's go ahead and we'll start off with a grid container representing the entire page here. We'll use the justify of space around to make sure that we get our contact form on the left and then our contact info on the right. And then we'll use align items of center to align the contact info in the center vertically of the contact form. So then our items inside of this grid container, we'll first start off by using our trick to wrap a grid container with a direction of column so that we get our contact us label up at top, and then the text fields in the middle, and then the send message button, all of that arranged top to bottom. But we'll wrap that grid container with a grid item so that the main containers justify and align items props will work correctly. So we'll go ahead and that will represent our entire left-hand side, and then we'll have a grid item with a grid container direction of column for the right side as well. Then we'll keep breaking down the left side, first with a grid item holding a typography that is going to represent the top part with the label contact us. Then we'll go ahead and have a grid item container direction of column just to make sure that we have all of our text fields wrapped together. And so we'll have a container for all of them and then a grid item wrapping a text field for each individual text field for each field of the form. Then we'll finish that off with a grid item holding a button that is going to contain our send message label and the send icon. Over on the right, we'll have a grid item container, and so this will have each row of our contact info laid out from left to right with our icon on the left and the info on the right. And so that will have a grid item for our image and then a grid item with a typography for the info. We'll go ahead and that same pattern will just be repeated for each of the following sections. All right, so that's going to be the general structure that we're going to use. Of course, we'll probably need to tweak it a little bit, add some styles and all of our alignment props, but hopefully this breakdown really helps you guys understand the concept when you move on to your own projects of how to understand visually the things that you're going to be building and the structures necessary to create them. Let's head on over to the code editor and we'll get started. So I'm here in the code editor, and under our pages folder in the front end, we already have a contact.js that we've just been using as a temporary placeholder. So we just have our layout component wrapping a simple paragraph that says contact. So if we have our servers running and we go up to the contact us button in our header, you see that we just have the word contact appearing, and now we can build out our page from here. So let's go ahead and let's go and import some of the components that we'll need to build this. So we'll import the grid component from @material-ui/core/grid and import typography from Material UI. Then let's go ahead and we will import, let's destructure out the make styles function from @material-ui/core/styles. And then let's come under here and let's go ahead and import a couple images that we'll need as well. And we're actually going to start off, we're not going to build the text fields yet. We'll go ahead and do that in a separate video because there's a little bit to explain there of how we're going to set that up. But we can go ahead and import address from up directory images/address.svg. We'll import phone from up directory images/phone_adornment.svg. And we'll import email from up directory images/email_adornment.svg. So those are going to be the 3 icons that we'll use for our contact info. Now we can go down and let's replace this dummy component, the paragraph, and we can go ahead and here let's start off with our grid container with a default direction of row, and then we'll use the justify of space around and align items of center to get everything started off nicely. Then we know we'll need 2 grid items. So grid item, and then we can go ahead and underneath it create another grid item. And this first one is going to represent our contact form. So contact form, I'll go ahead, comment that out. And then here, this will be our contact info. I'll just make that comment there. Let's also come up, I forgot we're going to need the import button component from @material-ui/core/button, because that'll be what we'll need to actually click a button to send our message. So this first grid item is going to start off with just a typography component. And from the theme, this is a variant of H4, and this will simply be our contact us label. All right, once we get this on the screen, we'll go ahead and add some styles to make sure that this actually looks correct. Oh, and actually, sorry, we are going to need to wrap this. Remember, this is our grid item representing the entire contact form, and so inside of that, we'll need a grid container of direction column to make sure we get all the items within this stacked correctly. So then here will be our first grid item with our typography component. Then under this, we're going to have the grid item container for all of our text fields, but let's add that later. So for now, let's actually just add another grid item, and this will wrap our button. And again, we'll use a typography variant of H4, but this time it'll just say send message. All right, but we're also going to need the icon, the little paper plane from the design. So let's go up, forgot to grab, import send from up directory images/send.svg. So we can go ahead and adjacent to the typography, so inside of our button, because the button is going to recognize some text and an image, and it'll nicely style that for us. So then we'll have an image with a source of send and an alt of send message. All right, so that should get us off to a good start on that side. So now here, we can scaffold out the structure for our contact info section. We said that this will also be a grid container direction of column. And then inside of here, we'll have a grid item container. So we'll go ahead and combine that for each of the rows of our contact info. So just like before, so let's go ahead and we will copy this item container, paste it 3 times for the 3 sections that we're going to have. The first, we'll have a grid item. This will wrap an image with a source of the address icon with an alt of address. And then we'll close that off. And then adjacent to that grid item, another grid item, this time with a typography. And this will actually be a variant of H2, mostly for the styles, but the font size will actually have to go ahead and reduce. So we'll make that change, but everything else is equivalent to the H2, so it'll just be an easy fix to overwrite the font size. Then here we can just enter an address. So I'll go ahead and just use 1234 South Example Street in Wichita, Kansas, and I'll just use the default zip code of 67111. Alright, so now we should have our address icon sitting next to our actual address, contact info for our made up store. And now we can go ahead and do the same for the other items as well. So here, have a grid item wrapping our image, this time for the phone, an alt of phone as well. And then another adjacent grid item for our typography variant of H2. And this is going to be our phone number. So I'll just use 555-555-5555. Now let's go ahead and finish up here in the last grid item container with a grid item for our image with a source of email and then an alt of email. Close it off. Another grid item with a typography variant H2. And I'll use the example email I've been using of zachary@var-x.com. So you can see it's pretty easy once you get comfortable with the grid system, and actually if you break down visually the design that you need to create to really just scaffold out the beginning of your component, the beginning of your page, and then go in and add all your styles and everything else that you'll need after you get the main structure built and on the page. So let's go ahead and save this. And we can flip on to the browser, and it's going to look like there's basically nothing because everything that we've set up is currently with the text of white. So we'll have to go ahead and let's come back in the next video and style this up.